This story happened to me when I was still a sophomore in high school. We decided to spend the fall holiday in Fort Worth, Texas. Me, my brother Chris, and a friend of ours, who for the sake of the story I'll call him Pete. We were all bored one day during our vacation stay and decided to go explore a tunnel that led into the sewers under a bridge, just because we had nothing better to do. The day that we did this, it was sort of a last-minute kind of thing, not very much planning or thought was put into it. Anyways, this is how I remember it happening all these years later. My brother, Chris, had invited our friend Pete. We wanted to do something different this time, aside from just playing video games. We suggested that we all go outside and go walking in the field behind our house. As we did that, we descended across the street beyond the field, where there was a pretty busy street with traffic throughout the day. After just walking across, we walked towards the bridge underpass. We carefully walked down to the swamp under the bridge, trying not to slide into the dirty-looking water below. We saw lots of graffiti down there and a tunnel opening to the sewers. Then we thought, why not go exploring? We thought we would be safe as a trio, so my brother Chris entered first, me being in the middle and Pete at the rear. The tunnel wasn't wide enough for us to walk side by side. It was so narrow that we had to walk a single file in a straight line. We used the lights on our cell phones. Now, let me clarify, this was before smartphones and iPhones. So the lights on our cell phone screen were all we had to navigate. We had some light peeking through the outside from the sewer grates above, but it really wasn't much to make a difference. We traveled at a reasonable pace, seeing a lot of graffiti on both sides of us. As we made our way down, nothing out of the ordinary occurred. We heard a lot of cars passing on the street above us. Everything sounded and looked okay for the most part. Then we got to the end of the tunnel. It led into a room with a sewer manhole with a lid closed and two more tunnel openings, one on the left and the other on the right. Now you would expect this room to be covered in graffiti, but strangely, there were only 3 words spray painted in white. It read, "The Wrong Way." It was at this bone-chilling moment that an overwhelming sense of dread engulfed us. We all started to feel a bit on edge, as if someone concealed by the surrounding darkness was watching us. Suddenly, there came a torrent of what sounded like voices crying out in agony, along with loud stomping footsteps, as if someone in boots was making their way toward us. The horrific sounds emanating from the tunnels were distorted and seemed to bounce off the walls around us. It reminded me of the scene in The Haunting of Hell House, where the 2 leads of the movie started hearing the footsteps of a ghost before it started pounding on their bedroom door. We all immediately turned around and ran back the way we had come from. As before, Chris was in front, I was in the middle, and Pete was at the rear. We all were terrified that someone was right behind us as the relentless footsteps picked up their pace. I remember Pete was kind of pushing and shoving me because he was probably the most terrified, being at the very back. As we ran, the hellish torrent of voices seemed to intensify, and they all suddenly ceased at once. We made it out of the opening of the tunnel, and immediately made our way back to the top of the bridge, never looking back. As soon as we felt that we were safe, we finally stopped to catch our breath, and we talked about what happened for hours. I concluded that it was probably just some homeless people living down there. They probably heard us and set off to scare us in the only way they could, and the ominous graffiti sign, "The Wrong Way," was probably put up by them as a warning to stay away. Regardless of what happened, we never did anything like that again. I have not been to that sewer tunnel since, nor do I ever plan to. In all these years, I've never told this story to anyone. I am a 22-year-old female from a small town. Due to the lack of entertainment in the town, my family decided to surprise me with tickets to a concert to one of my favorite artists in South Texas. For this concert, I will be joined by my sister. I was excited and thought it would be a great time. It was a 3-hour drive there and back. We had a wedding to go to the next day, so we decided to save some time and take some back roads. I wish we could have stayed at the hotel. After the amazing concert, we decided to get some Taco Bell and head back. This was around 11:30 p.m. Everything was going fine until the low tire pressure light came on. My sister pulled over and got out of the car to check things out. I could hear her curse. The tire was not only low on pressure, but completely deflated. My sister and I were both raised to be independent. We knew how to change a tire. While we were in the process, there was a man that emerged from a nearby tree line. He was about 6 feet tall. What really caught my eye was how well he was dressed. He wore a suit and had this creepy smile. He walked up to us and offered to help. We kindly declined, but he just stood there and continued to stare at us. We made up a white lie and said that our parents were on the way, and they would be here any second to help us. We told him this in hopes that he would just leave, and he eventually did, and just turned around and walked back into the tree line without saying another word. I thought it was weird how he came out of the tree line at the perfect time. Just when we thought it was over, the same man comes back out, except this time there was a knife in his hand and he was wearing a black mask. I freaked out as he runs up to our car and sinks his knife into the rear passenger side tire. Me and my sister scrambled into the car through the driver's side doors, and we locked it just in time. That's when a white truck pulls up behind us. We thought it was someone coming to help us, but that's when we saw 3 more men wearing black masks exit the truck and surround our car. The 3 men started banging on the windows while the guy with the suit got on top of the hood and starts to drag his knife across the windshield, making this awful scratching sound. At this point, we had called the cops, but there was no sign of them showing up anytime soon. One of the men banged on the window so hard I thought it was going to break. That's when the man in the suit jumps down off the hood and reaches into his suit and pulls out a gun. I thought we were dead in that instant. I began to pray while my sister started screaming hysterically. The guy walked up to the rear passenger side window, pointed his gun, and shot, sending shards all over the back seat. The first shot didn't break the glass enough, so he pulled the trigger again. My heart had never raced so fast in my life. The masked man used his gun to move away some of the remaining glass and unlock the back door. During all this commotion, I had retrieved my pepper spray from my travel bag. The man made his way inside the car, and at that moment I suddenly turned around and practically emptied the entire bottle in his face. The man immediately put his free hand over his eyes and began to scream. He pointed the gun at my sister, and at that moment I couldn't breathe. It was like the entire world froze. But for whatever reason, the man didn't pull the trigger. And that's when I heard the fast approaching police sirens. The masked men fled and jumped back into their truck, and within seconds we saw their taillights disappearing into the night. The police arrived too late, but we gave our report. I tried my best to give a description, but most of what came out of my mouth was gibberish. I was obviously pretty shaken up over what happened. The police combed the area, and it turns out we were at the wrong place at the wrong time. These men had set up nails on the road and were waiting for their next victim. They were possibly human traffickers. The police put out an APB on the truck, but as far as I know, they never found the men responsible. Always be careful when you're driving on the back roads of Texas. These men could still be out there looking for their next victims. And always be sure to bring something with you to protect yourself. It might just save your life. Around the start of every summer, my family and I go on a 3-week vacation around the U.S. It's always a blast, and I have very fun memories of the trips, but I will always be more alert on them next time. We were more than halfway done with our vacation, so we had to head home. That meant that we had to go through the state of Texas. My dad wanted to drive through the night instead of stopping, so I decided to get some rest. I woke up around the middle of the night and noticed the car had stopped moving. I sleepily rose from where I was sitting and looked out the dash window. I saw my dad with a random dude under the hood. I thought, no big deal. Well, not until something caught my eye. There was a ditch beside the road, and in that ditch, barely, just barely, I could see the top of a couple of dudes holding weapons of various types. My blood ran cold, but I had to warn my father because he hadn't seen them yet. He had his back turned to them. I thought as quickly as I could and kicked my door open and yelled, "Hey Dad, the gun fell out of the holder and I don't want to touch it." This is a lie, of course, as we don't own a gun. and both the man and my dad looked confused. I waited for my dad to come to where I was. I then explained the situation. For the first time in my life, he actually looked terrified. He said to the man, "I'm going to move the car closer." The man replied, "That's fine," and we both jumped in the car. My dad immediately floored it down the road. We did notice a car's headlight in our back window, but after a while, it disappeared. We drove the rest of the night into the morning. We were not tired at all. My mom then woke up, and we had fun, but kept a lookout. We made it home safe, and I did a little research on the area. It turns out that a few months ago, a couple were actually kidnapped and are currently still missing in that area of Texas. I have no idea if what happened to those poor people could have happened to my father and our family if I hadn't seen those men.